The ECFR Quarantimes series has enlisted the brightest voices around the world to help us think beyond the immediate response to the corona crisis and consider Europe's role in a post-corona world. This is a special edition of the series. We have welcomed in this series previous speakers, such as the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Sweden and Spain, and just very recently, in a very special session as well, EUHRVP Josep Borrell. But as the pandemic situation now allows, quarantine is slowly giving way to summertime. And it's very appropriate to return to the end of these sessions with a return to the lessons learned from the coronavirus crisis. At the very start of the German Council presidency in the EU that we find ourselves in here in Berlin at the moment, the corona crisis is still the key task to tackle. But it's not just the health emergency, it's also the political and economic emergency that now has to be dealt with in the future. There is probably no better case study to be found around the world on how to effectively deal with the health emergency in a transparent and highly sophisticated way rather than Taiwan. In a democratic, diligent, and digital way, Taiwan has dealt with the complexity of the challenge that it has faced with only 7 deaths and roughly 450 confirmed cases. This was quite remarkable. At the same time, the crisis and the current situation in Hong Kong have also brought to a much broader public attention the complexity of Taiwan's international engagement, its role in international multilateral institutions, and its importance for tackling matters of global concern. We're therefore delighted to welcome Minister Joseph Wu, who has kindly agreed to speak with us this morning or afternoon, but depending on what continent you find yourself on. Mr. Wu has been serving this current position for more than 2 years now. Previously, he served as Secretary General in the Office of the President, as Secretary General of the National Security Council, and as Secretary General of the Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP. Mr. Wu has an academic background in political science, so he's actually just a fellow researcher as well. He holds a bachelor's degree from National Cheng Chi University, a master's degree from the University of Missouri in St. Louis, and a PhD from Ohio State University in the United States. Minister Wu, it is an honor and a huge delight to welcome you to this ECFR Quarantine session. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Greetings from Taiwan. It is a privilege to take part in this European Council on Foreign Relations video conference. I look forward to talking about Taiwan's experience of fighting COVID-19 and exchanging views on consolidating global democracy. The ECFR has done excellent work in promoting awareness of the international situation. And I want to thank Dr. Orto for inviting me to address you at this important intersection for global democracy. Today, I'd like to share Taiwan's story with you. When this SARS-like atypical pneumonia first appeared in Wuhan, China in late 2019, it was predicted that other than China, Taiwan will be one of the worst affected countries given our geographical proximity and close people-to-people exchanges. Yet, even as the disease continues to spread around the globe, Taiwan is being able to contain the pandemic and minimize its impact on people's daily lives. Indeed, research from the Democracy Perception Index found that 87% of the people in Taiwan have been satisfied with the government's response during the pandemic. This is something to be proud of. So I would like to take you through some of the factors that have contributed to Taiwan's successful fight against this COVID pandemic. First, swift and early action. Taiwanese medical experts were quick to note the outbreak when it began in Wuhan in December last year. We reported this to the World Health Organization on New Year's Eve, and on the very same day became the first country in the world to begin screening passengers from Wuhan. On January 12th, we dispatched a team of investigators to Wuhan, something WHO did not do until mid-February. On January 15th, we listed the new form of pneumonia we had observed as Category 5 notifiable communicable disease, a full 7 days earlier than China, where the disease originated. And when the first case of COVID-19 arrived in Taiwan on January 21st, we set up our Central Epidemic Command Center with full government authorization. The CECC has led the charge, implementing border controls, tracking and monitoring programs, and quarantine mechanisms, and planning for the production and rationing of critical materials. We took these actions early because of our tragic experience with the SARS outbreak in 2003. Indeed, an official from the Taiwan Centers for Disease Control has been quoted in the local media as saying that Taiwan has been preparing for this day for 17 years. Second, a whole-of-government approach and great public-private partnerships. Knowing that this outbreak would have a wide-ranging impact, the CECC has drawn on the resources of many ministries and sought to make joint decisions. My own ministry, for example, has monitored the international situation, engaged in international cooperation, and helped repatriate citizens. Military personnel supported the initial production of critical materials and disinfection of public areas. Officials responsible for the economic affairs ramped up national production of PPEs and created financial packages designed to support local businesses. And this whole-of-government approach has been marshaled under the CECC's effective coordination and command. However, Taiwan's fight against coronavirus has not relied solely on the government. Instead, every citizen has had a stake in stopping the pandemic. When we wanted to increase the production of surgical masks and sanitizing alcohol, the private sector worked with us to form national teams. Private businesses, franchises, and local communities all launched temperature monitoring and disinfection programs that have supplemented government efforts. And Taiwan's democratic institutions have also been central in efforts to contain the virus. This model of public awareness and public buy-in is radically different from the authoritarian model that Beijing has been pushing. Third, transparency and honesty. Since the very beginning, the CECC has held daily press conferences to brief the public about what has really been happening in Taiwan and around the world. Officials have discussed confirmed cases and explained their origin, context, and progress on contact tracing. The CECC has also educated the public on how to protect themselves and worked with the media to combat disinformation, the vast majority of which has originated from China. So the CECC's transparency allowed it to establish firm authority and gain public trust. And the cancellation of a number of large public gatherings came about not because of any government order, but thanks to consensus among well-informed citizens. So if you were to ask me about the differences between the Taiwan model and the Chinese Communist Party model of fighting COVID-19, I would say the most important factor has been transparency and honesty. The biggest difference in how authoritarian states and democracies have addressed the disease lies in whether the reality has been presented to the public honestly. We in Taiwan cannot afford to conceal or to lie, whereas the CCP is interested only in controlling society and concealing the truth. Taiwan's experiences have shown that there is a way of overcoming pandemics without sacrificing such fundamental values as democracy, freedom, and human rights. As China's propaganda pushes the lie that authoritarian regimes are more capable of containing the spread of viruses, Taiwan is proud to serve as a counterweight to this false narrative. As we look toward a post-pandemic world, I would like to highlight some of the significant differences between Taiwan and China. Over the past few months, China has gone from being the epicenter of the worst pandemic of our lifetimes to rebranding itself as a benefactor and savior in the fight against the pandemic. It has conducted several high-profile assistance operations, notably targeting Southern European countries in the early days of their respective outbreaks. At a time when European solidarity is needed more than ever, China's actions have left many people on the continent with the wrong impression that China has done more for their countries than the European Union has. In this context, I would like to juxtapose what EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, called the politics of generosity with Taiwan's anti-pandemic assistance efforts. In Taiwan, successfully ramping up domestic production of personal protective equipment has enabled us to donate essential medical supplies to over 80 countries, including more than 50 million surgical masks in the last 2 months alone, over 10 million of which went to Europe. Contrary to China's approach, which sowed discord between the EU and its member states, Taiwan ensured that its assistance, delivered partly through the rescue stockpile channel, contributed to EU solidarity. In providing medical supplies to diplomatic allies and other friendly countries, we aim to strengthen their democratic institutions. Aside from using bilateral assistance as a political tool, China is also showing growing assertiveness in its efforts to rewrite the global narrative on COVID-19. It is sponsoring disinformation campaigns designed to embellish its image and call democratic governance into question, and openly fueling false rumors about the development of the pandemic. Even more worrying, China is censoring factual references to the disease origin in Wuhan and openly retaliated against Australia after it called for an independent investigation into the matter. China's wolf warrior diplomacy shows that it is taking its revisionist agenda well beyond its borders and endangering free speech around the world through a mixture of disinformation. China's aggressiveness does not stop there. Even during the height of its own outbreak, Beijing relentlessly sought to intimidate Taiwan militarily. Since January, it has sent numerous military aircraft and vessels through the airspace and waters near Taiwan. China has also intensified its activities in the South China Sea, East China Sea, and along its borders with India, including plans to set up an Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, in the South China Sea. We are seeing a clear pattern. China is trying to take advantage of the global power vacuum caused by the pandemic and aggressively consolidate its influence. China's proactive behavior during the pandemic has not only increased tension and threatened peace and stability in the region, but also put democracies worldwide to the test. It is crucial that we respond forcefully through concrete actions to underline our commitment to defending democracies, freedom, and human rights. I firmly believe that democracies must stand together strongly at this moment. Taiwan is willing to share experience with the world. It was thus all the more disappointing when WHO failed to invite Taiwan to this year's World Health Assembly. Taiwan's participation in the WHO is crucial for global health and call for your support on this. Furthermore, China is weaponizing its economic clout and using its dominance in medical supply chains to advance its authoritarian goals. We therefore believe it is urgently needed to think about global supply chains, strengthen strategic independence, and protect our technological autonomy. Taiwan is a reliable partner with strong manufacturing capacity and technological and medical expertise. So we are an ideal partner for Europe in terms of bolstering strategic global supply chains and defending shared values in this time of unprecedented challenges. Deepening industrial cooperation between Taiwan and European countries would hasten both sides' recovery from the pandemic. In particular, an investment agreement between Taiwan and the EU will be a great first step in further aligning our norms and standards and promote business opportunities for both sides. Even during the pandemic, China has been expanding its authoritarian influence. The latest example, of course, the national security law in Hong Kong. This controversial law, passed on June 30th, has effectively revoked Hong Kong's autonomy and the rule of law in Taiwan on the front line against China's expansion of authoritarianism. We feel the people in Hong Kong and are determined to defend our freedom and democracy. Dear friends, in closing, I would like to invite all of you to visit Taiwan after the pandemic. If and when you do, you will see a vibrant democracy and a force for good in the world. And finally, I believe that as like-minded partners, we should stand together to defend democracy, even as we face the difficulty of fighting the pandemic around the world.